Okay. Okay. Get this fixed. Bear with me. Okay. Praise the Most High. Thank you for coming back with us again. This is Sabbath moment on the Sabbath day. I'd like to give all praises to the Most High Abba, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. This is a True Ministries production. I am your host, Kadar, and this is Sabbath moment. We're gonna go into the part 2 of rendering tribute. Part 1, we just went into rendering tribute unto Caesar. What is Caesar? On who are the tax collectors, meaning who are the publicans. And we also were showing that Matthew, who was the Levite, that Christ went to his house and had dinner, and there were Pharisees and Sadducees amongst them, where they were communing with each other at Matthew's house. And Matthew was a publican, a tax collector. We also went over the different accounts, and we saw that there was a chief priest, a tax collector named Zacchaeus, who himself was gladly accept Yeshua Mashiach to come and feast with him at his house, and he was a rich man. So, with all these different accounts, we see that Christ Yeshua really connected himself, even though he had his disciples, but he made it a point to align himself with men in high places, men who had a financial understanding of economics, especially during that time. Okay? So that's one of the things that we see as we went into the scriptures of rendering to Caesar what is Caesar's. Okay? And we also know that our present day tax collectors, those who are filing our taxes, were considered publicans during the time of Christ. All right? So now we're going to go into rendering tribute unto God. What is God's? Part 2. In the wilderness. And please, we'd like for those of you, if you haven't already, who's watching this channel, to subscribe to our channel, True Heritage Ministries. Whenever we, put an understanding up, you'll be one of the first, or the second, or the third to know once we have a lesson or an understanding come up on the channel. Okay? All right, so let's get into it. Rendering unto God what is God. Now, let's go to this understanding here. When we last, part 1, we went here where Matthew 22, Yeshua Christ says, they say unto him, Caesar. Then said he unto them, render therefore unto Caesar the things which are Caesar. And Yeshua said, and unto God the things that are God's. So, part 1, we went into what belongs to Caesar. We knew that the publicans were collecting taxes for the Romans, for Caesar. But Christ said, give unto God what is God's. Now, the Pharisees and Sadducees wasn't expecting that, because they knew that they were not giving unto God what belongs to God. Okay, that's why Christ went amongst the publicans and the chief publicans, the tax collectors. All right? Because he may have been trying to get them to give unto God what is God. So, in order for us to know what belongs to God, we're going to go into the wilderness. When the time of Moses, during the time a tribute was set up by the Most High. Okay? So let's dive into it. Rendering unto God what is God in the wilderness. Okay, let's just give it this. Let's go to Exodus 30 and 10. This is the book of Exodus, chapter 30, verse 10. And Aaron shall make an atonement upon the horns of it once in a year with the blood of the sin offering of atonement. Once in a year shall he make atonement upon throughout your generation. It is most holy unto the Lord. All right, let's stop right there for a second. So we're in Exodus 30. And this is where the Most High is giving Moses instructions on what the high priest Aaron is to do every year on the Day of Atonement. He's telling Aaron about the different sacrifices or rituals that he needs to do every year on the Day of Atonement to atone for what? Atone for the sins of Israel. So that's what Aaron, the high priest, was to do every year to atone for the sins of Israel. Exodus 30. We'll get to it. Okay. So read on. Now we're going to go to the same chapter, verse 11 to 12. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, When thou takest the sum of the children of Israel, after they number, then shall they give every man a ransom for his soul unto God. Every man a ransom for his soul unto God. So when it says every man, that's referring to every Israelite male is to give a ransom for his soul. Every Israelite male. Okay? We continue. When thou numberest them, that there be no plagues amongst them when thou numberest them. So he's telling Moses to do a census, to number every Israelite male, not female, male, in a census. During what time? While Aaron was doing what? An atonement for Israel. Okay? That's what we just read here. Stay with me. It's going to get very complicated and interesting. Okay, let's go to verse 13. Still Exodus 30, verse 18. This they shall give everyone that passes amongst them that are numbered. Everyone that passes amongst the Israelites that's been through the census, that's been numbered. This what they shall give. Okay? Half a shekel after a shekel of the sanctuary. Half a shekel after the shekel of a sanctuary. A shekel is 20 jaras. A half a shekel shall be an offering unto the Lord. This is the Lord that the Most High told Moses to do. Every male must give to atone for them souls, to make an atonement, a half a shekel. Okay? That's 20 jaras, a half a shekel, who went through the census. Every male. So we know that there's a census, and there's also every male have to give what? A half a shekel. Okay, during what time? During the time of atonement. Let's go. Verse 14. everyone that passes among them that are numbered through the census, from 20 years old and above, shall give an offering unto the Lord. So every male that went through the census at the age of 20 years and above is to be numbered, and they shall give an offering of a half a shekel. Okay, that's what we just read here. From 20 years old and above shall give in an offering unto the Lord. Let me backtrack. Let's go back. Exodus 30:13. This they shall give everyone that passes through the census, them that are numbered, a half a shekel after the shekel of the sanctuary. A shekel is 20 jaras. A half a shekel shall be an offering of the Lord. Verse 14. From 20 years old and above shall give an offering unto the Lord. So now we know that every man who is 20 years and above that's been through the census by Moses have to give during the time of atonement a half a shekel, an offering unto the Lord. Now, you know, the shekels we know is a form of money, finances. Okay, when it says to give it to the Most High, is it going to go directly to the Most High? No. Is the Most High and the heavenly angels going to come down and pick out the bag of shekels and go right back into the heavenly realm? No. But when he says that an offering to the Most High, what does this mean? We're going to go into it. Okay. Verse 15. The rich shall not give more, and the poor shall not give less than half a shekel. Okay, so now if you're well off in Israel, you got to give half a shekel. A shekel is 20 jaras. That means you got to give 10 out of 20. Now, just because you're rich doesn't mean you give 15. Okay? Most I will not accept that. You have to give half. That because you're rich, you don't give more, because that's a form of high-mindedness. Okay? Now, it also says, and the poor shall not give less than half a shekel. So if it's poor amongst you, and you have 20 shekels, you have to give half of that. Just because you're poor and you need extra money to go, feed your family, doesn't mean you give 5 shekels. You got to give half, which is 10. That's what the law states. You got to be 20 years and above. You have to pay your offering. Okay? 20 years and above. Let's continue. All right. So, let's go back a bit. We understand that now, during the Day of Atonement, while Adam is doing the oblations for the Day of Atonement, right? Israel, every man 20 years and older, had to give a tribute, an offering to the Most High as a form of a tax, who've been through the census. Who did they give it to? We're going to go into it now. They give it to the Levites. That's how they give it to the Most High, by giving it to the Levites. All right? Let's go. Tax given to the Levites for their service. So, when the Most High said give an offering unto the Lord, he meant give it to who? To the Levite, because the Levites were serving the Most High. Okay? The Levites didn't have an inheritance. So the Levite survival depended on Israel as a nation through what? Through the tribute every year doing atonement to atone for their sins was given to the Levites. And that's what you will call a tax. Okay? It didn't go to the Most High directly. But the Most High said make an offering unto the Lord by giving it to the Levitical priesthood. Okay? Now, let's go to Exodus 38 and 24. And all the gold that was occupied for the work and all the work of the holy place, even the gold of the offering, was 29 talents, 730 shekels, after the shekels of the sanctuary. Now when you go into Exodus, they're going into a little math here about how to divide some of the shekels that they receive. What did they do with it? How was it an offering to God, and what was done with these shekels, with the money? Okay? Was 29 talents and 730 shekels after the shekel of the sanctuary. The sanctuary was the priesthood. That's where all the shekels went to. Okay? Verse 25. And the silver of them that were numbered of the congregation was 100 talents and 1,700 and 60 shekel after the shekel of the sanctuary. Let me repeat it again. Let's see who can do some math. 100 talents and 1,700 of 60 shekels. Let's try to break that down. What is the sum here? Who can guess it? I'm going to repeat it again. I'm going to try to guess it. It says 100 talents and 1,700. So that means it's 700,000, 100, and the 50 shekels means 65. So it's 700,000, 165 shekels. That's how I'm going to interpret it. That's how I'm going to try to break it down. If anybody could do better, break it down and email us your breakdown of this equation right here. Okay? But this is what they calculated during the time of atonement when they collected. Okay? Verse 26. Becca for every man, one for every man must, that is, a half a shekel after the shekel of the sanctuary. For everyone that went to be numbered from 20 years old and upward, for 600,000 and 3,550 men. Okay, this is where it gets interesting. It said everyone that was numbered, which was male, 20 years and above. Let's do the math for that. How many men? For everyone that went to be numbered from 20 years old and upward were 600,000 men, 3,550 men. So altogether, you're talking about 600,000, 3,550 men from 20 all the way to Moses' age, to the elders. So it's about 600,000 men, 3,000. Okay, because when you go on Exodus 12, it says that there were 600,000 foot soldiers that came out of Israel. So the 600,000 foot soldiers were those who was 20 or above. So those were really the men of war between the age of 20 and the age of maybe 30. So that's 600,000 men. The other 3,000 men were those who were above 30 upward to about 70. So the other the other 3,550 were like the elders, the older ones. Okay? So it was just the men. And they all had to give a shekel, a tribute, a tax to the sanctuary, to the Levite, to the Levitical priesthood, according to the Most High. It didn't say the women. The women didn't have to pay the tax during that time. That was the prize benefit of being an Israelite during that time. But unfortunately, during our time, if a woman don't have a husband, if a woman don't have a head, she, during this captivity, if she's a single mother or single woman, she has to go and pay a tax onto Caesar, onto our rulers at this present time. But during the time of Israel, the woman was either underneath a man, her husband. If she didn't have a husband, she was underneath her father, who would pay the tax for representing her. Okay? In other words, the women was exempt from paying taxes personally during the time of Israel. The only people that had to pay tax were men from 20 and above. Even today, soon as our young people turn 20 and they're working a job, they're going to be required to pay tax. So you got to let all your young people know when they turn 20, they are going to be required to pay a tax or tribute to our rulers, okay, to this country. All right, okay. Let's go ahead. Okay, so we understand that it had to be men 20 years older that went to the census. There were 600,000 men who were who were soldiers, and there was 3,000 who were older, 3,550 who was a bit older also through the census. So if you double this, including the women and children, you're talking over 2 million Israelites during the time of Moses. Okay? If you really do the math, 2 million. All right, let's go. Verse 30, Exodus 38, verse 27. And of the 100 talents of silver were cast the sockets of the sanctuary, and the sockets of the veil, and 100 sockets of the 100 talents, and the talents of sockets. Okay, what that means is what they did with a lot of the silver and the gold and the shekels is they melted it down and start making preparations to start making the tabernacle. They took the gold and the silvers and melted down. They took how you can say a blacksmith, a craftsman. They paid them with the tax they received. The Levites paid them to what? Melt down the shekels, the money, and start making different knobs and socket for the building of the tabernacle or the sanctuary. They started making golden cups and all that the Levites needed in order to start working on the tabernacle. This is what they did with the shekels that they were given year from year during the time of atonement, as we just read in Exodus 30. Exodus 38, verse 28. And of the 1,775 shekels, he made hooks of the pillars and overlaid the chapiters and filtered them. Verse 29-30. And the brass of the offering was 70 talents, and 2,400 shekels. And therewith he made the sockets to the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, and the brazen altar, and the brazen grate for it, and all the vessels of the altar. So now we see that they took a good portion of the shekels, the gold that they have, the half of shekels that every man 20 other gave as a tribute, and they did what? They start building the tabernacle with it. And that was just for 1 year. But every year after that, they had to do the same thing, start giving the taxes for other things as time progresses. But at this particular moment in the wilderness during the time of Moses, they had to melt down the shekels so they can start building the tabernacle for this sanctuary. Okay? Now, we're going to go into the book of Kings, Chronicles, 2 Chronicles 34 and 1. All right? I just want to recap a bit. We just went into the time of the wilderness with Moses, where every year we went over, men 20 years and over have to give a tribute yearly to atone for their soul, a half a shekel to the priesthood. So they can do what? Do the work of the Most High for the offering. Now, we're going to go into during the time of the kings, when Israel was a nation. 2 Chronicles 34:1. Josiah was 8 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned in Jerusalem 130 years. So that means Josiah was the righteous king who ruled for 31 years in Jerusalem as a king. Okay, this is where we are. We're going to jump down to verse 9. And when they came to Helikah, the high priest, they delivered the money that was brought into the house of God. So this is during the time of Josiah, when they're going to go back to rebuild the temple for a feast. Okay, because prior to Josiah, the other kings went off and defiled the temple. All right, but now when Josiah became king, he wants to clean up the temple and got rid of all the wicked priests from the temple, and now they're starting to renovate the temple. Okay, so now the high priest Helikah, they delivered the money that was brought into the house of God, which the Levites that kept the doors had gathered of the hand of Manasseh and Ephraim, and of all the remnant of Israel, and of all Judah and Benjamin, and they returned to Jerusalem. Now you see that? Helikah sent the priests to do what? Go gather all the money, all the shekels, for the day of that they're supposed to collect during the time of atonement from all the Israelites who were from what? Let's read again. Israelites that were gathered from the hands of Manasseh and Ephraim, which is northern kingdom. Now at that time, a lot of northern kingdom went into captivity with the Assyrians. The Assyrians had took northern kingdom into captivity. During the time of Josiah, Israel, Judah, were operating in Israel. No captivity had overtaken Judah at that time, but the northern kingdom have. So the money that was collected by Josiah, priests from Manasseh and Ephraim, was the remnant of the northern kingdom that were still in Israel. So not all northern kingdom went into captivity due to the time of the Assyrian captivity. When the Assyrians came in, there was a remnant that stayed, and once they stayed, they still had to give a tribute, a tax every year to Jerusalem, to the king. Again, and when they came to Helikah the high priest, and they delivered the money that was brought into the house of God, which the Levites that kept the doors had gathered of the hand of Manasseh and Ephraim, and all the remnant of Israel, and all Judah and Benjamin, and they returned to Jerusalem. Verse 10, and they put it in the hand of the workmen. So they put the money which they collected from the remnant of the northern kingdom and from Judah and Benjamin, to put it on the hands of the workmen, to pay the workmen. To do what? That had the oversight of the house of the Lord, and they gave it to the workmen that wrought in the house of the Lord to repair and amend the house. So in order to repair the temple, the house of the Lord, they had to collect the tax or the tribute from all the rest of the Israelites to do what? Use a portion of it to pay the workman Israelite to take care of the house of the Lord. Okay? That's how you gave unto God. Because once you give it to the priest, and the priest oversees the bank, the customer receipt, right, the high priests and the Levites, who at that time in Israel was like the IRS, they had to make sure that everything was distributed accordingly for the purpose of Israel. That's how you gave it to the Most High. Okay, let me read on. Verse 11. And even to the artificers and the builders gave they it, to buy hewn stone and timber and couplings and the floor, the houses which the kings of Judah had destroyed. So let's go back to what I was saying. The king of Judah prior to King Josiah, the Judahites had messed up the house of the Most High. So now Josiah is renovating the temple of the Most High by giving the shekels that they received from the men that was 20 and above every year doing the atonement, to atone for their soul to the Most High. To do what? To go and buy supplies, stones, labor, okay, in order to renovate the temple so they could have the next Passover or next feast during Jerusalem. Okay, that's how they gave it to the Most High. That's how you gave unto God for the work of the Israelites every year. Okay. Verse 12. And the men did the work faithfully, and the overseers of them were Jahath and Obadiah, the Levites, the publicans, the tax collectors, the money changers, of the sons of Merari and Zechariah and Meshulam, of the sons of Kohathites, which was also Levites, to set it forward the other of the Levites, all that could skill of instrument music. So now we see that most of the funds was overseen by the house, the tribe of Levites. So the Levites were the publicans, just like we read in part 1, that Matthew and his other publican and Zacchaeus, the chief publican, they were what? They were Levites. So the Levites were doing the Romans' bidding as the publicans collecting the tax. Unfortunately, a lot of Levites became what? Extortioners, usurers, and adulterers during the time of Christ, because they ignored their office where they were collecting the tribute, the taxes, the shekels, for the Most High. For what? For the work of the Most High to take care of the nation of Israel. Okay? Let's go. Now we're going to go to the book of Nehemiah. This is post-Persian captivity. This is after the Assyrians had allowed Israelites to go back into the land. This is after Persian captivity. Okay? This is the book of Nehemiah. Now, Nehemiah 10:31. And if the people of the land bring ware of any victuals on the Sabbath day to sell, that we would not buy it of them on the Sabbath day. So this is Nehemiah making a declaration to Israel that, listen, anybody who's bringing stuff on the Sabbath to sell, you're not to buy anything on the Sabbath. Nehemiah was introducing no buying or selling on the Sabbath, right? When it came out Persian captivity back into the land of Israel. All right. Or on the holy days, and that we would leave the 7th year and the exaction of every debt. Nehemiah 10:12. Also we made ordinances for us to charge ourselves yearly with the third part of a shekel for the service of the house of the Lord, to charge ourselves yearly the third part of a shekel for the service of the house of the Lord. So Nehemiah reinstituted the system of giving tribute tax yearly during the Day of Atonement for what? To build the house of the Lord for the nation of Israel. He still used the same commandment that Moses gave in the wilderness and applied it during their time back into the land. Let's continue. Nehemiah 10 and 31. For the showbread, and for the continual meat offering, and for the continual burnt offering, of the Sabbath, of the new moons, which is new months, for the set feasts, and for the holy things, and for the sin offering, to make an atonement for Israel, and for all the work of the house of God. You see that? Nehemiah instituted giving the shekels, each Israelite 20 and above, every year during the time of atonement, making atonement for their sins, a half a shekel for what? For the sanctuary, for the house of the Lord, for the showbread, for the feast days. Because all the feast days, the Levites need the funds so they can operate and function during the feast days, for the holy days, for the new moons. Okay? So this is where all the shekels, all the tax, all the tributes for the Sabbaths of the new moons, and for the set feasts, and for the holy things, and for the sin offering that the high priest, like we read in 30, that Aaron was doing, for the sin offering, making atonement for Israel, where every man 20 years and above had to make an offering of a half a shekel to make atonement for their sins. This is during the time of Nehemiah, to make an offering to make an atonement for Israel for all the work of the house of the Lord. You guys marinate on this part right here. Marinate on this verse right here. Okay? It's in the Bible. It's in your book. Move on. Now we're going back during the time of Christ. We saw that in the wilderness, the Most High instituted for Israel, every man, to give a tribute, a tax, a shekel for the atonement of their sins, okay, in the form of money. To who? To the Levitical priesthood, to sustain the tabernacle, to sustain the temple of God, and also to sustain Israel as a nation. Okay, that's why the lot of the shekels went to the Levites. That's why now when you go into the time of Christ during the Romans, the Levites were well off. All the publicans who were Levites, who was collecting the taxes, were well off. Matthew had a big house. Matthew had 10, 15 people at his house eating and feasting. Zacharias was the chief. Imagine, and they say he was rich. Imagine how big his house was. Okay. Book of Matthew, chapter 17, 24. And when they came, and then when they, and when they were come to Capernaum, they that received tribute money came to Peter and said, do not your master pay tribute? Now, Capernaum is in the lot of Naphtali. It's a country or a city. Matter of fact, Capernaum is a neighborhood in Galilee where Peter lived. Okay, that's where Capernaum. So it's in the lot of Naphtali. So a publican came all the way to Peter's house, right, to collect the money from him. It says, they that received tribute money came to Peter and said, don't not your master pay tribute? And he said, Yes. And when he was to come into the house, Yeshua prevented him, saying, What thinkest thou, Simon? Of whom do the kings of the earth take custom or tribute? Of their own children or strangers? So Christ asked Peter, now after the publican came and asked about did Christ pay his taxes, Christ asked Peter, what do you think? Do our rulers take custom money for their children? Do they take it from their children or they take it from strangers? What is Peter's answer? Notwithstanding, wait. Okay. Now what had happened, it's not there. Peter said, when you go to the next verse, I don't know what's not there. When you go to the next verse, it says, Peter said to strangers. And Christ asked, well, is the children free? He asked Peter that question. So Christ said, are the children free? Those are two precepts that kind of like miss here. All right, well, let's just read on. You can read it in your Bible. Verse 25. And he, Yeshua Mashiach, this is Peter, said, Yes. And when he was to come into the house, Yeshua prevented him, and saying, What thinkest thou, Simon? Whom do the king of the earth take custom or tribute? Of their own children or strangers? So that was the question he asked. And Peter said they take tribute from strangers for their own children. That was the basis of the answers when you go into 2 verses after that. I do apologize that is not there. Kind of overlooked it. But we're going to move on. We're going to read on. Matthew 27. Matthew 17 and 27. Notwithstanding, this is what Yeshua Christ says. Notwithstanding, lest we should offend them, go down to the sea and cast a hook and take up the fish that first come up. And when thou hast opened his mouth, thou shalt find a piece of money, that take and give it unto them for me and for thee. So this is what Christ told Peter to do. Since the publican came and the extortion is coming, them talking about, hey, what's your tax money? Christ said to Peter, okay, look, we don't want to offend them, because we have to render unto Caesar what is Caesar. Go fishing, right? And all the fish that you get, he says you're going to pull out a penny out of his mouth. Now, that's a parable, okay? That was not literal. Let's read it again. Notwithstanding, lest we should offend them, this is the parable. Go down to the sea and cast a hook, and take up the fish that first come up. And when thou hast opened his mouth, thou shalt find a piece of money, that take and give it unto them for me and for thee. So Christ is saying you will find a piece of money from the fish's mouth, the parable, and then you will bring it to the publicans and pay the tax for him and for himself. It's a parable. What Christ really meant is like, go out fishing, Peter, and all the fishes that your disciples were able to get, go and sell it to the marketplace. Sell it, and the money that comes in, give it to the publican for the taxes for me and thee and the rest of the disciples. That's what Yeshua was saying. Okay? There's not going to be no money in the fish line. It was a parable. Okay? If anybody got an issue with this verse and disagrees with me, please subscribe to us, True Heritage Ministries, or you can email us at True Heritage Ministry, True12heritage@gmail.com if you disagree with that parable. Okay? The parable was not literal. It was a metaphor saying to go out and sell the fish that you caught. Because remember, Peter was a fisherman. And then from the money you make, give it to the publicans for the taxes for myself and yourself. Okay? All right. Okay, 1 second here. Mm-hmm. 1 moment. Yeah, Maryland. Okay. So, now we know which is God's when we went to the wilderness. Okay, when Christ said, give unto God which is God's, he was telling these Pharisees and these publicans that, listen, you guys are collecting all the tribute rendering to Caesars. But what about God? What about the people of Israel during that time? Because you guys were extortionists. You was unjust. You was charging people usury. You were charging people interest. Just like you go into our bank system today. Okay? When Christ asked Peter, when they take tribute, is it for their children or from strangers? Peter said for strangers, for their children. Because their children, in this society here where we are today, the rulers and their children don't pay a high interest. A lot of them don't pay any taxes. A lot of them have an understanding or education on how to avoid paying taxes. Whereas we as Israelites, it's unavoidable for us. We as Israelite in captivity, we have to pay our tribute onto them. And when we go into their banking system, what do? They put more interest on us. Their own people, their only children, they'll get my interest of what, 2%, 3% if they're financing a car or a house. But with us, we're on the 14, 15, 16% bracket. Are we free? No. Okay? And this is what Christ was showing Peter. All right? But during the time as Israel, we as a nation, we were giving tribute to each other as a nation to help build the nation accordingly to the Most High. The money that we gave yearly during the time of atonement didn't go out to the Most High. He didn't come down with the angels and pick it up and went back up. No. It was given to the Levites to make sure they oversee the whole economic system when it came to Israel. Okay? So, in all of that, we just want to touch a bit about the taxes, because this is the time, and there's a lot of people that don't believe that you should be paying taxes, but hey, woe to you if you don't, because right now they're making laws and legislation that where no one's going to be able to avoid it, especially during these times. Okay, so like to say right now, let me get ready to end this because we're about to go to do our feast again. We're going into a double Shabbat, and for those of you in Brooklyn, if you want to come partake, we're at Heritage of Jacob Church, 2801 Church Avenue, Brooklyn, New York, 11226. All right, from 3 p.m. to sundown. Okay. Again, I'm your host, Kadar. This is Sabbath Moment. Feel free to email us. And I like to say, peace and blessing. Shabbat Shalom.